Hey, so I'm recording this as I walk uh, downtown. I just left the busiest part of the peaceful protests, and I wanted to start my voice memo, but it's not downloading, so I'm just going to walk with this. And while it's very hopeful to see people standing for something, what's really disheartening is like just the fucking hatred, man. All these people saying no justice, no peace, no racist ass police. And, quit your job. Or just all the shit against the police. These are just dudes, right? Like, National Guard people out here, like, they're like young people, They're just people doing a job. Of course there's horrible fucking racists out there. There's everywhere. But it's just kind of heartbreaking. And I just think I'm emotional because of everything, Because of everything going on right now. Because we've all been stuck inside with a fucking pandemic. Because we have a fucking horrible idiot president. Did I mention the pandemic? And if you're seeing this, it's because this is the quiet part over here on the other side of the park. I can go back over the busy part later, but I just had to come down here. You know what I mean? Like I can run down here, and I can, instead of having to worry about driving and dealing with it, I could run down here. So I ran out yesterday and saw some of the stuff and captured some of it. And I just thought I had to come down here again. I had to go for a 6-mile run, and I got to come down here. Because I've just never seen anything like it. I mean, look at this. This is like the entire National Guard is guarding Centennial Park. Like, that's a pretty bold fucking thing. They're just guarding it, I'm waving at these people. I mean, this is like the shit like you see in the movies, right? With people just fucking preparing for a fucking war. I mean, look at this. This is some tactical motherfuckers right here. I mean, I'm standing here under this big fucking wheel that, Here goes the best dad ever. And this is just nuts, just fucking nuts. Excuse me one second. How many hours they got you guys out here? What's that? They don't tell you? They just come back and relieve you when you're done? It's a long day, dude. What's that? Do they think the park's just going to get messed up? Is that why no one can come in the park? Because it seems like there's not much you can damage in the park. Just the grass, I guess? They don't know. And we got SWAT doing some tactical shit right here, man. Doing some tactical shit.
Let's see if we can kill some more of this way here. That's all.
A lot to talk about here.
So much. I know. Deep breaths, right? That's what I've been doing like for the last 5 days.
This could go a lot of different ways. I could cry like multiple times on this
Me too.
podcast. I really could. And I guess I'll start by saying, for those that don't know, I live in Atlanta. I live 2.5 miles from the CNN Center and Centennial Park, which is, if you've seen the footage in Atlanta, that's where a lot of stuff is happening. I'm actually in this, where I'm now is Midtown, which is a lot closer to Buckhead, which is where some other looting happened. But on Sunday, you know, I what's today? Tuesday?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on Sunday I went for a run and I just thought, well, this is just so close to my house. Like I should just go down there. Like
Mm,
I can get in and out. I won't have to park and I can just sort of see it myself.
right.
So I went on Sunday afternoon and um I guess to try to put it into words, it's a very different experience than watching something on television. Being
Yeah.
next to people who are experiencing this was very overwhelming.
Sure.
I just found myself like tearing up and not even being sure why.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that it was specifically like a lot of anger or hatred. I think just sort of like the vibe of emotion is in the air.
It is. Mm-hmm.
And it's one thing to see people on TV. Like, listen, like I'm like everybody else, like you're watching it. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's bad to have a judgment or opinion based on what you're watching, but it's just a very different experience. And I'm trying to explain to my wife because my wife's watching it. And then I did it again yesterday. I came home and then
Mm-hmm.
you see it again on TV and you're like, oh, I was just there. And it feels
Mm-hmm.
quite different.
Can you can you say more about like, does it feel, because many of us don't actually have an opportunity to sort of be in a place where it's live. Like a lot of people watching aren't by major cities. I have, we live down the street from a police station, and there's maybe like the most that there was 200 people, but it was very peaceful and people were just honking as they were driving by. Like for people who can't be there but maybe want to be, or for people who don't want to be, I don't know that it matters. Like, does it feel scary? Does it feel sad? Like what, I mean, you said the energy, like what is the energy?
Well, I'll tell you what I experienced.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I experience is, so I live in the West End, so that's west of the city.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 miles of not much, right? Just sort of like this part of town called, oh, I can't even think of it. Not Capitol View, but I can't. It's on the tip of my tongue. It'll hit me. It's sort of a neighborhood that's tried to sort of be a thing, but isn't quite there yet. But it's restaurants and bars. There's a few of them. I can't think of the fucking name of it. Telling me because it'll hit me later.
Do you
But
want to
then you
borrow
come,
my hat? Maybe that would help.
but then you come over the hill and the massive stadium you see. You come over the
Mm-hmm.
hill and State Farm Arena, which is where basketball and a lot of events are, and it's all connected to the CNN Center. This is all connected. So the first thing you see is that's sort of the perimeter, and so
Mm-hmm.
there's a fucking there's a Humvee, right? Not
Oh,
the shitty Humvees from the 2000s, but like, there's like military, and it's like, huh, this is my city, and now there is a military presence on my street, which I usually
right.
only see in other countries. That's sort of the first thing. It sort of takes you off guard a little bit. And then as I went over the hill, I'm like, there's the crowd, and it just sort of overtakes you. Is that there's people, there's there's people with a lot of signs. There's people who are, there's definitely people who are down there for the gram, right? There are some women dressed in like, you know, they've got their mask and they've got their midriff shirt, and the midriff shirt might even have a message on it, but they're working it, right?
Got it.
And I was trying to sort of even like, you know, this journalistic, I guess, part of me, or this curious part of me is like, okay, what percentages, what am I looking at here? Is it like it skews younger? Is it black and white? Is it even? Like what percentage like look angry? What percentage are wearing masks? Like all that stuff's going through my head. And so interestingly enough, I think the COVID-19, like people wearing masks kind of like is like you sort of look the part like instantly, right? Like you sort of look the part of a protester because you're wearing a mask, which I know is like sounds weird, but it like I think it sort of becomes part of the uniform, right?
I understand. Yeah.
When people can't see your face, you just sort of feel more anonymous. So, you know, there's a guy over here that was like talking, and it was like, you know, people had gathered around him and he was doing his thing and talking about injustice, and you know, I'm kind of into it, but then he took a hard right into some Jesus stuff, and I'm like, you lost me. And he didn't lose the crowd. They were still doing their thing. And there's people just offering water to other people, which was reassuring. Like I saw a few different like tables and carts of like fruit and water and like that. And then, you know, I went around the park, and the National Guard is around the entire park. So if you want to Google Centennial Park, it's huge, it's massive. Yeah. And they closed it off. And there's guys in, it's National Guard, and so they're all geared up and they've got their giant thing and they're just standing there. And I look at their faces and they're really young. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow.
They're really young.
Yeah.
And when you look at them, and then I know this is a really long explanation, but I'm getting to the part I think that's most disheartening.
Yeah. Is
that them and then the police who are all there and just sort of doing their thing, sort of standing there. And when you've got police in riot gear, it's very intimidating, even though they're just like, they're told to just stand there. Right. Just stand there. And when you have people in their face, and the chant that when you and I were growing up and before us was no justice, no peace. Like that was the thing. Right. Now it's no justice, no peace, no racist ass police. That's the chant. And you look at the faces of men and women, and some are really young, who are not racist, are a person. That's really disheartening to me. And I think that's kind of what I want to talk to you about, is a lot of the Instagram stuff that's like, you know, well, if you're a cop and they do this, then you're horrible too. I saw one that was, if one day my job was to wake up and mace people and throw pepper spray at them, that I would quit that job. And it's like, as if somehow like working at a grocery store or being a dentist or anything is anything close to like being a policeman. So are there god awful, horrible, violent policemen? Yes. Is it most of them? Of course not. And I saw one today. For every one of you leaning down, there's 10 more that, you know, are fucking beating the shit out of people. And it's like, no, that's not true. So I'm also trying to say I'm a 47-year-old, 48-year-old person who's seen some life. And at 22-year-old, did I call every cop a pig? Maybe. But I think that's the part that's disheartening. And trust me, I never thought I'd be the fucking police defender. But, you know, like look at this. If you look at any of the pictures I posted, these are just men and women like doing a thing, who certainly didn't want to wake up one day and go, well, no one's been able to leave their house for 3 months. And then yet another horrible police brutality case comes up and throws the country into fucking shit. Like, did they wake up that day with that job? Want to have that job? So anyway, I've said a lot. No,
I think like this, like I think as a society, we're in a deep internal struggle and a tremendous external struggle. And I think like, you know, and let me just say this first. I'm a psychologist, but I will be the first to say that I, for sure, struggle with my own prejudice and bias, and have, you know, my husband is Black, and he has caught me many times saying something off color, saying something that he's called me out immediately. And I've been like, I can't believe that came out of my mouth. And so even as we talk for the next 45 minutes, there could be something that I'm sure I will offend somebody who is white, somebody who is Black, somebody who owns a business, somebody who doesn't, somebody who, you know, just anybody. So I think one of the things that I think is really hard right now is that I do feel like we have to have conversations about this, and we have to talk about it. And so many of us are so uncomfortable talking about it, because the truth is, as humans, we like to talk about things we know about. Like, we don't go into conversations typically feeling comfortable talking about what we don't know. And I mean, you see it all the time. People will say like, yeah, I don't really like to talk about politics. Often it's because they don't really know what their opinion is, or they don't feel educated enough to talk about it. I'm one of those people, for sure. So, but I think right now, and this I think happens, you know, when these kinds of situations come up that are so fraught with emotion and internal conflict, you know, we want to sort of like lean completely in one direction or lean completely in another direction, because being in the gray zone of I don't know, or I think this, but I also think this, and they're confusing because they seem conflicting, and so I don't know how to navigate it. I think, you know, it's being demonstrated here. And from my perspective, you know, I have eyes through a different lens of, yes, like there are some police officers out there that are from my perspective horrible human beings that do horrible things. And are they the minority? I actually don't have the answer to that. I don't know. But does my husband have to teach our boys that they're the minority? No. He has to teach them that they're the majority, because my children have to edge on the side of the police are out to get me. And so I am going to cross my T's, dot my I's. Yes, sir. Hands in the air. Can I reach for my glove compartment? Like, my children have to do that. So my husband has to teach them that the police are not there to protect and serve you. They are there to police you. Whereas you might teach your children, the police are there to protect and serve you. So I think there's a division there.
Well, I said that to Stacey too. I said, you know, I'm out on a run and I'm approaching this area, and I know that as a white person, I'm probably going to pass through faster. Right? Like, maybe they wouldn't look at me twice, but I know that, like, if you're a Black person, like, running, right, in that area, you might get, you know what I mean? You know, it's interesting you say that, because my wife and I have taught our kids the same thing. Like, do not fuck around. When they pull you over, put your hands on the wheel.
Right.
Like, don't argue. Like, right. But it's from a place of, it's just coming from a slightly different place. Like, I can definitely see why you would say to your kids, listen, it's different for you. Like, even if you're with your white friends, like, you need to, especially because this is what happens a lot of times.
That's right.
But I think that my wife and I are probably the exception. If you grew up in the suburbs and the police have never been a problem for you, and they've only been there to like help, I can see you not having that sort of streetwise experience of, you know, like, you need to like be, but I just, you know, as a guy who's been arrested more than once, sober, I've learned, you know, it doesn't take much. The thing that I wanted to talk to you about, because we've talked a lot offline,
Mm-hmm.
you know, about the social media piece
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and how much it you know, insincerity bothers me. We're going to pretend we care about military. Well, now it's Pride Month, so we're going to put all these Pride posts out, and the rest of the year we're going to go back to not giving a fuck.
Right.
And so, you know, Orange Theory just put something out like "We stand with you," and it's like, do I buy that for a second? Am I,
Right. I
you know
understand.
what I mean? And
I
so,
do.
so um, I, I've been called out before. I was going to call my friend Chris Stevens, who's probably listening, because I remember a while ago I posted something. I posted, I don't remember exactly what it was. It was like a, I don't know if it was something about, it could have been skewed that police weren't great. It was like a Black Lives Matter, but then the next shirt was either an anti-Trump shirt or something else. And um, my buddy Chris Stevens is like, well, like, why are you posting that on ORM? And I'm like, well, because fuck Trump and I don't care and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, all right, but you know, I might. It just, I thought at the time it didn't matter. And now I realize like I haven't posted anything on ORM
Right.
about this because I don't know that I want to.
Right.
I've done it on my personal account because I want to remember it. That's honestly why. Like I've taken a ton of pictures while I was down there, and I only posted a couple just because I want to remember, and I know that like it'll come up every year like as a thing, and I've got a record of it. Or if I scroll back through, but I think there are companies that absolutely should post, and then I think there's companies that should leave it the fuck alone. So I know you had a feeling about that.
I do. And so, and here's my feeling. And I knew we were going to talk about this. So to be fair, last night I really thought long and hard about it because I kind of wanted to come to the table with an articulate response. See, there I am wanting to come feeling like I know what I'm talking about. Right. But, I do believe that companies and people should not be obligated to post anything about social injustice, you know, whether it's about gay pride or you know, Black Lives Matter or, you know, Veterans Day. And so I believe that. And here's like where you can make fun of me, but I believe the tension of opposites gets brought up here. And I can be disappointed when people don't. So, you know, I texted you and Josh yesterday on our thread about, you know, that I hadn't really seen anything from any of the elites in OCR, and I was disappointed. And so we kind of went back and forth, and I don't believe it's their obligation. And I can still be disappointed when I feel like someone is not speaking up on a platform on which they have influence. And everybody uses their platform different. You know, like it took me a few days to think about whether or not I wanted to say anything or not say anything. And I thought like, well, does anybody really care like what I have to say? You know, I'm certainly not an influencer. I'm not on social media a whole bunch. And I did see some of my friends who are Black women say, you know, silence, you know, something along the lines of, you know, what hurts most are friends that are silent. And that spoke to me. And so I ended up posting something, but make no mistake that the 3 days prior to that, I was having lots of conversations with my husband, and we were having lots of conversations with our children. So, you know, I wasn't avoiding, we weren't not talking about it. And I think what people do need to understand and recognize is just because somebody isn't posting something on social media doesn't mean they're not having a conversation, doesn't mean they're not talking to their friends about it, doesn't mean that they're not exploring their own thoughts and feelings about it. And I think it's also okay for individuals to be disappointed if somebody that they look up to or a role model that they feel has a voice and influence chooses to be silent. I think it's okay to be disappointed. And I think that's where the tension of opposites lies, is that, listen, I don't think you have an obligation, and I can be disappointed when you don't.
I only joke with you about post because you're my friend. Like, of course, I don't think there's a problem with that. So I feel like I'm compelled to say something here.
Great, say
I'm not,
it.
well, I'm not sure how it's going to come out, but this whole idea, once upon a time, it was much more common for someone to say, I'm not racist. I have a black friend, or it doesn't matter to me if you're like, I don't see color. And now in the last 10 years, it's been like, that's dumb. Of course you do. Like,
Right.
please don't be ignorant and say that you don't notice differences in people, and we can embrace them. That's gotten slightly more of a woke take, but it's still people that will say that. We lived in an area called Kirkwood, which is on the east side of town, which was one of these like ground zero gentrification. We moved there in 2008. By the time we moved out, because my income took a turn and we couldn't afford the house that we bought, my fault, bought a house we couldn't really afford in the first place, we moved to the West End, which is not nearly as gentrified. And I mean, this is going to get a whole nother conversation, which I think we might have had, which is the first thing people always say is like, well, like, is it safe there? And I would say, my kids play outside every day in the park in front of my house. Like, I don't, like, there are gunshots and I feel safe. Like, I'm not worried.
Right.
But my kids notice the difference. Okay. They're now 13, 11, and 6. And so the 13, 11-year-old were much younger, but they would make comments about the different, like, I liked it better over there, or I wish we had this over here. And it's pretty obvious that there's less money on this part of town and that there are more black people in this part of town. So that's an observation they made. That's not, although I'm sure they picked up on things we said, like they observed it. Like that's, there's nothing fucking racist about that. This part of town is slightly shittier and more black people live here than white people. So like, do you see what I'm saying?
I do. I very much see what you're saying. Yes.
So that's not taught racism or taught anything. We now live in a less, what do you call it? Affluent part of town. So I don't know what I'm trying to say here.
That's a great question, Matt. What are you trying to say? Well, I think, but so here's I think where it's like, I think this is where things just get sticky and messy because, like, there are truths and, like, and your children sort of observing that, that this part of town that is less wealthy is also more populated by Black individuals is a truth. Now, what would, where I'm sure some individuals would go with it, myself included, and my husband, and myself only learning these things. Like, I am a newcomer to the game, by the way. Like, and it didn't just happen when I met my husband and I was like, oh, I've fallen in love with a Black man, therefore I'm not racist anymore. Like, that doesn't happen. But, well, how is it that in this neighborhood, it is more populated by Black people and less wealthy and less affluent? Let me teach you how this population has a more difficult time coming up through the ranks. And, we are not all born into equal circumstances. And so I think it's an opportunity for teaching, but I don't think you and your children having a conversation about it, therefore, is a racist conversation. It's actually an opportunity to learn about racism and the systemic racism that exists.
Well, it's also, and again, I've thought about this a lot recently. So today I was thinking about it, and my kids go to this school, which is a charter school, which was built specifically for the kids that lived right near that school, right? Let's give them a quality public school. And we don't need to get into the whole how fucked up the school system is, but its majority is Black, majority. which it's interesting because people were starting to move to Kirkwood, this neighborhood that we lived in, just to get into that school. Cause that used to be like, hey, that you're a tier 1, as they say. And now that side of town has gotten so popular, you don't necessarily get in that school, which people wanted to get into. Right. So, but the friends they've made in the neighborhood, and I was trying to think like, well, does Jackson have friends in the neighborhood that they've stayed friends? And the answer is no, because a lot of them don't live there. They visit their aunts or grandparents in that neighborhood, but they don't stay there, or they just move. Like, it hasn't been like in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
I had my friends from 3rd grade through high school because everybody stayed in that neighborhood.
Right.
Maybe the parents moved after their kids left school, whatever. But we have tried to explain, and that they're starting to see, like, it's okay. So Jackson has a friend who shall remain nameless, who he's become good friends with, and who's pretty out of control. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't really listen, even though he says he is. Like, you go, hey, dude, don't do that, and then he'll do it again 5 seconds later. And so, like, we went to this pool the other day, found this pool that was open, and they were completely acting up. And like, the lifeguard asked him to like get Stacy, like, hey, go get this person that's with you, that's your guardian. And he said, she doesn't want to talk to you. And so then like they were getting kicked out, and it was like, why are we getting kicked out? And it was like, oh, because. And so we had explained to Jackson, like, listen, we don't, like, his house isn't as stable as ours because we kind of know what's going on there.
Yeah.
So we can't bring him places now, because when you say to an adult, this adult doesn't want to talk to you, and I've tried to calm you down, like, they will call 911, and like, that's not cool. So like, you can play with them, but we're not going to take him somewhere. I'm not going to take him to McDonald's or anywhere else.
Right. I get that.
Because he thinks it's okay to lie to an adult and say, no, she doesn't want to talk to you, when the adult tries to say, get your mom to not kick us out. So again, it's like he knows that their house is different than our house. And so trying to teach him, like, it's not that we don't like this kid, but we're not going to bring him with us anymore, because that's bad news.
Right. I get that. I understand that.
I don't know where I was going with that, but just trying to explain that not everybody grows up in a house with like a mom and a dad that both live there all the time, and that, you know what I mean, like, he knows, he's heard, like, maybe they drink, because like since we don't drink at all, and I know, but that's not the norm, that most people see their kids drink, but like, if you don't drink at all, and then you go to somebody's house and the mom and dad drink like a lot or more than normal, you know what I mean? Yeah.
No, I get that. I mean, are Jackson and are your kids right now asking about what's happening? Like, you mentioned that you were thinking about bringing Jackson to the
I do think it would be good to see obviously during the day, not anywhere close to the afternoon or evening, because it definitely gets, it gets whatever. But they're not really asking. They wanted to see the pictures that I took, and they were pretty fascinated by it. They're not, no, it's not like they're really, I mean, like, Emma posted something the other day, you know what I mean? And she has Black friends because the school they go to. But no, I don't know exactly how they feel or how they're going to remember this time. I mean, it's just all so freaking much to grow up, like, it's just a much different experience from, you and I have had all this life before this happened, and they haven't. So this is like, holy shit, this is happening now. And when they look back, it's going to be this massive, massive part of their childhood, I assume, or maybe it'll get forgotten about just like everything else. But it feels like it won't be.
I know.
Grow up in a time with this president and COVID, and now this, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, if you've only lived 11 years, this is a lot of it,
I know. Well, it's interesting because, we are not like huge news people, but sometimes my husband can kind of get like sucked into the vortex and just sort of becomes attached. And
yeah, Stacy does too.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's for good reason right now, but right now he is sort of sucked into the vortex, and the TV is on in the background more than usual in the living room. And the living room is also where our kitchen is, which is also where we, our dining area is. So like, that's like the main space. And when the kids are eating lunch, I don't love the TV on in the background. And I've asked, Carrie a couple of times during the last few days, like, can we turn the TV off? Like, I don't need them hearing all this noise. And his response is, no, I want them to hear this noise. I want them to remember this. I want them to begin to like internalize this as an event and process in their life. And it's been, for me, it's all of this has been such a learning process. My 15 years of being married to Carrie has been like a learning opportunity for me. And I have to work through my discomfort of, is this going to traumatize our children? Or, and also the question, like, is this going to make them feel less than? Is this going to make them feel like they're not as valuable as the white kids across the street? So, I've had to process all that, and it's been, and it is like sort of the trauma of COVID and then this.
I feel like I want to ask you a really lame question. I've seen your son, right?
Yeah.
He's
Which one's older?
He's light-skinned-ish, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what about your other kid?
Parker and Keaton. They're both, Carrie had a term for it the other day and I forgot what it was.
Mocha?
They definitely, no. But they both have lighter skin.
How much when you're out with your husband and or kids do you feel stared at? How often in your life, percentage wise?
It depends on where we are, but
Colorado's pretty white though, right?
Yeah, but we've only been here for a year.
Okay. So
for example, when we lived in Dallas and we would go to like the wealthiest part of Dallas is called Highland Park. And there are some great restaurants in Highland Park. We would go to Highland Park. 95% of the time, Carrie was the only Black man in the restaurant. And 95% of the time when we walked in, people looked. And, this is the other thing. Like this is like an example of where just ignorance or not knowing comes up. Like I would talk to my mom about this at times and she would say, well, that's just because both of you are so beautiful. And I would be like,
sounds like something my mom would say.
And I'm like, no, it's because he's Black and I'm white. And,
right.
My husband, has certainly been through his handful of experiences, but, we've had our own. I mean, we've certainly had people give us looks. We've had people say things to Carrie, about us being in an interracial marriage. And even yesterday, like this is interesting. So even yesterday, last night, a neighbor knocked on our door and they live behind us. And they're amazing, amazing people. And they have two boys who are very similar ages to Keaton and Parker. And the father, brought Band-Aids over because we had to borrow their Band-Aids. But, point of the story is he was saying, I just want you to know, he said to Carrie, that I'm talking to the boys about what's going on right now. We're having some really good conversations. And we had one the other night and one of our sons said, oh, you mean, so this stuff happens to Carrie and to Parker and Keaton? And the father started to kind of tear up and say, yeah, it probably does and probably will happen to Parker and Keaton. And then the child across the street started to tear up a little bit. But so, and we are, in this neighborhood that we're in, Carrie is like, one of maybe two other Black men that live in this neighborhood. So, we don't go unnoticed, I guess is the way that I'll say it. But our children, are, they are, you can tell they are of mixed race, I guess I would say.
Well, I've had in super recent years even, so I've talked about it a lot, so I don't want to rehash it, but I've talked about how when I first moved in this neighborhood, I had some run-ins with people. I called the police a lot and didn't think it was racially motivated, but just like, I don't want to fucking deal with nonsense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now as a resident of this neighborhood for this many years, I feel differently.
Interesting.
So much so that I hadn't even noticed until someone pointed out to me. The big one was that these kids were riding these four-wheelers like up and down the street really fast, and it really pissed me off. And I was calling the cops on him, and I had this whole interaction with a guy where I was asking him nicely, and he basically was like, fuck off, dude. Like, this is my neighborhood. And I didn't even understand it and was kind of mad. And then Jackson was actually riding on the back of one of them. And someone said, remember when like you called the cops on people for doing this? And it sort of like was like, wow, that's like, I see, like, and I still would if it was going on really badly. But the point is that like, I'm not so quick. Like, it's gotta be really bad. Like, didn't I tell you when like these people were doing fireworks and like I went out and kicked their fucking fireworks, which is not smart. And they threw a bottle at me, and it wasn't smart to do that. But most of the time I've learned that people that come to this neighborhood and do shit aren't from this neighborhood. People that come and fuck up our park and do stupid shit. And it happens. We have a park, and I don't know if they reserve it or not, but people come and have birthday parties and whatever. And it's not the people who live in this neighborhood that tear it up or act like jackasses. But I think you saw this thread. There was this woman, although I didn't know it was a woman at the time, who lives catty corner behind us, and who put a movie on in her backyard. Yeah. Mm-hmm. At 8:00 at night. And I was like, all right, this is really loud. And our bedroom is in the back of our house, so I can hear this. Really, it's really loud. Like, you know, you can blow up one of those things. Right. And I didn't do anything. And sure enough, she started a second movie at 11:00. And I was like, well, this is fucking nuts. Yeah. Like, who's doing this? Right. So I walk over there and I knock on the door, and she comes out, and I really tried. Like, I gotta like be nice, like not be a dick about it, because I'm trying to be a good neighbor. And like, I expected her to say, oh my God, I just didn't think it would be so loud, or I'm apologize. And I was like, hey, I live a couple out like behind you, and it's really loud. And my kids are trying to sleep. And she was like, what? Yeah, fine. And then like, have a good night, and slammed the door and went back inside. White woman, I don't know, mid-30s, whatever. Could have given a fuck. Right. Could have given a fuck. And it's like, all right, well, now we're in a situation like, do I just call the cops on you? Like, and I did call the police, and I don't know if they came or they didn't, and I eventually fell asleep or whatever. But like, people can be shitty. You know, yes. She had a party a week later with people in her backyard, music up, people doing whatever. And again, it's like, I try to like not be a lunatic. Like, okay, people have parties, we're adults, but like, don't adults know that like at a certain time you just turn the music down? If you're outside because your neighbors are going to be next to you. Right. I don't know where I was going with this. But I think like, so this is where like, this kind of circles back to our other conversation around like, listen, like certain cops can be shitty, certain people can be shitty, right? So, and it's like, you know, it's a little bit of like you know, Black Lives Matter. Well, all lives matter. Yes. I mean, like everybody can be shitty, right? But in this in the situation where we are today, this is an opportunity for everyone, particularly white individuals, to think about the ways in which they are shitty to people of color, and the ways in which their thoughts, beliefs, and feelings perpetuate certain behaviors that continue racism. And we all do it. And you know what? I'll give an example of what this looked like for me, so that people out there might be like, well, I don't understand. Like, I'm not like, but I believe, like, I have like you said, like I have a Black friend, and I believe that like all people are created equal and da-da-da. So rewind like 13 years ago, we're driving down a street in Dallas, and this gorgeous car, like I don't remember if it was like a Bentley or like beautiful car, is coming in the other direction. And there's a Black gentleman driving the car, and he's younger, like 20 looking, not like 45. And I'm getting all like verklempt even telling this story because it's intense. And Carrie goes, now where does somebody get the money to get a car like that? And I said, probably drugs. Now, if that was a white person, I would not have said that. Correct. And that is racism. Right. And did I think in that moment he's Black and therefore he's a drug dealer? No, I didn't. But it just came out. Right. And
Carrie
It's what I
immediately,
was thinking when you were describing the story. I was like,
right,
oh, drug dealer.
right. And Carrie immediately was like, babe. And I was like, what? And then I knew it. Like I knew what I had said. And he was like, don't say stuff like that. And so we had a conversation about it. He didn't shame me, but he educated me. And so like, that's what we're talking about here. Like these are the kinds of conversations that you need to have with yourself around your own thoughts, beliefs, and judgments and prejudice.
See, now I'm getting verklempt and I don't even know why.
Because it's a lot. Because it's verklemping. That's not the word.
Yeah, but why? Why am I upset right now?
I don't know. Because maybe that hits home for you. I mean, maybe, it's like because it's upsetting. Because this is upsetting. Like it's upsetting. It's awful.
I wanted to tell you the other part about the police thing. And again, like, I'd never think I'd be here, like the guy that's like, be nice to police people.
Mm-hmm.
And last night when it started to get, so I run down there yesterday or Sunday, I ran down a little bit earlier, but yesterday I ran down at like 5-6 o'clock. And so as the sun starts to set is when the police presence gets stronger. And because at 9 o'clock, it's like, get the fuck out of here. And there were some National Guard guys. And the other thing, by the way, is I really tried to like wave to people, acknowledge, because they're just standing there either like bored out of their minds or yelled at or whatever. And so like I try to wave, smile, peace sign to some people. So there's a couple of National Guard guys. And I said, it's going to get me really upset. And I said, how's it been the last couple nights? And they said, we've had some spiciness. I said, well, not as bad as that first night, right? Like, and I pointed behind them where like all the windows were broken. They go, yeah, that was the first, that Friday night was really bad. He said, but typically what happens is all these people go home and that's fine. He's like, he goes, this is great. This is a white guy. This is great. This is people expressing their freedoms. This is awesome. Like just pointing to just people just doing what they're doing. Some angry, some not, but for the most part, just doing their thing. He said, but once it gets dark, it gets, and I said, well, what is your directive? Like, what are you guys, like, what are they giving you to do? I've been watching The Wire again. Do you watch The Wire?
I have not, but okay. I know that I need to.
You should, and we could do an episode every week because I'm so in love with the show. But I always try to think of what's behind the scenes. And I said, "What's your directive?" He said, "Well, we don't do anything. When we're asked to clear, we make the announcement." He said, "But what happens is, like, he's like, I'm sure you've seen like a bottle rocket or two, like on the news." I'm like, "Yeah." He says, "So it starts with that, and then glass bottles, and then urine. So like we have to like." Right. So like, again, like, so when I see someone post every cop, whatever, and blue, whatever, and it's like, so like, here's a guy again, like going to work and is now like trying not to get piss fucking thrown on him. Right. And like, is there to like doing that to like prevent my city from fucking burning down is not a bad dude. And when you say all police, or for everyone kneeling down, there's 10 that are doing this. It's like, that's the same exact thing as me saying, well, there's some good black people, but most of them, they'll fucking rob you blind. It's the same thing. And how do they not see that, Dr. Ellen? I think that's what makes me so upset.
Yeah. I think they don't see it because it's really hard to hold two truths. It's really hard for us. And our brain likes to just make sense of something. And it's what we were taught as kids. Put all the squares over here and all the circles over here. Right. Yeah. And the triangles over here. That's where they belong. Right. So that's what our brain naturally does, is it likes to make sense of things. And it doesn't make sense that, that there can be horrific police officers and standing right next to them can be one who would probably choose to take a knee, at all times, and probably choose to just do their job and protect and serve. And it also doesn't make sense that you can have, a group of Black individuals that are kind and gentle and, you know, want to contribute to society and teach their children the right things. And you can have one that does something really shitty, but not because of the color of the skin, just because he's a shitty human being. So, you know, I think it's just, we have a really, really hard time with it. And I think like what I try and do in these situations is use the word and instead of the word but.
Correct.
Because it allows you to hold those two. Like,
it's really hard because I've made a very conscious choice to do that.
yeah,
In the last,
it is hard.
I don't know how many years I've done it, but since whatever, I have really tried to do that, not just in this, but in whatever.
Right. Totally.
Like I love Spartan Race, and they do some really horrible customer service based things. Or
right.
I hate to put Spartan in the racial context. I'm not trying to do that, but you know, like you know, Spartan Race puts on unbelievable events, and their social media is garbage.
That's exactly right.
A lot
exactly.
of times.
Exactly. And it's funny because I don't know if you've experienced this, but like, you know, when I do that and practice that, like even like literally physically, it feels uncomfortable.
Right. You have to stop your body from saying but.
That's exactly right. Totally. I think though that that's where we need to go. Like I really encourage individuals to just think about that. Like, what would it be like for you to say, like, you know, not all cops are bad, and we have massive racial injustice in our policing.
Dude, so even now, right? 2 cops just got fired because they pulled some college kids out of a car, right? And this is with the spotlight on them, right? I saw one yesterday where they beat the fuck out of some fucking newspaper guy, right? And it's like, some people become police so they can knock heads. Some people join the military because they're hoping they want to shoot someone. Like that's true. But certainly not, but it's certainly not all of them are that way. And I think the thing to take away, hopefully, from this is the policeman who started all this, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name, was like, oh, he has 20 things against him, right? It's like the priests, right? Oh, he was already caught 20 times. It's like, that's the part that has to stop. Is like, okay, like it's not a blight on you. It's not a blight on your command if this happens. It's a blight on your command if you don't fire that guy. That's the part that needs to shift.
Well, right. I mean, and you know, I think like, the Black community has a right to be completely angry. We should all be angry. I mean, we should all be angry at, from what I believe to be true, is we should all be angry at the racial injustice that occurs, particularly between in policing. Because again, like I go back to what my husband say, like, you know, for me growing up, you know, I grew up in a very affluent white community. We literally in our high school had 3 people of color. 2 of them were adopted. Right. And like, so I was not exposed to diversity in any way, shape, or form. And I didn't like the police, but I didn't like the police because they broke up our little white parties, you know, and didn't let us drink our beer.
Fucking
Like
pigs, man.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't a big fan, you know. But when I get pulled over, I don't think to put my hands. I've never put my hands on the steering wheel when I've gotten pulled over.
Start doing that.
Right. You know, but those are conversations that my husband has already had with our children. And he, you know, just the other day, Parker said, have you ever done that? And Carrie said, every single time I get pulled over, I do that. I put my hands on the steering wheel, you know.
I do. That's what I tell my kids to do.
Right. So, you know, but I think I really am like, I am doing such a deep dive right now in trying to just understand my own thoughts and feelings about this, and my responsibility as a mother, and my responsibility as a wife, and my responsibility in my small little family unit of, you know, 3 other white affluent individuals. And I think it's all an opportunity for us to just really dive deep. And I think, you know, to go back to sort of like the influencer thing on which I can hold some disappointment and yet still totally understand that people are not obligated to post any of this on social media. You know, the term influencer is there for a reason. Now, yes, it's gotten watered down undoubtedly over the past few years because people who like to claim they're influencers really have no influence. They might have 1.7 million followers, but only 30 people like their posts. You know, it's, but, you know, I do think that like, you know, I think what's important to think about is like, you have people looking up to you. Like whether you believe that or not, and whether you're just in the little like microcosm of the OCR community, you have people that are curious about what you have to say. And you know, you can choose undoubtedly what you want to use your platform for. And I would just ask you to think, what do you want to use your platform for? Like, that's a good question for you to ask yourself. I know you have feelings about that.
Well, I'm having sort of like, it's not an aha moment, but it's one that because I've had it before, but I'm going to say it out loud here.
Mm-hmm.
If I am trying to make a business transaction,
Mm-hmm.
that's the wrong phrase. If I meet somebody and it might be a business transaction, or there might be a way that I need something from that person or whatever, right? And we say, oh, well, let's follow each other on Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
And I see that ORM, which has 40.1K followers,
Mm-hmm.
is more than what they have. I instantly know they're going to be impressed by that.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Correct.
Or like if I'm gonna write a company, right? Even IG to IG, like, oh, I might want to do business with this company. And I see they only have 5K. I'm like, great. They're gonna see that I'm worthy, that I'm valuable to them.
That's right.
Or the other way around, like, oh, how can I write that person? They have 1.5 million followers. They're not even gonna see this message, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is like that, like I think of that like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
Mm-hmm.
I went to do a career day at a school. Okay. I was asked by a person in OCR, would you come talk to my kids about what you do?
Mm-hmm.
And I went to 3 or 4 different classes. And I'd say mostly minorities, like majority minorities at the school. And I did my little pitch about what it was. And it was only in the last class that, because I showed them like videos, like, oh, I thought they would think it was cool to like run in the mud or whatever. And a lot of them hadn't even been to an OCR before, right? Even though you think everybody's done it. But in the very last class, something about Instagram came up. And when they saw I had 40K followers, it was like, oh, this guy's legit. So I was like, I wish I'd known that in class 1. I would have led with that because it would have gotten their attention.
Sure.
Right? Even though we know, of course, people can fake it. But I'm saying that when I meet you in the world, it used to just be the car you drive or the kind of bling you're wearing. And now it's like, do you have the upper hand or do I have the upper hand?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And I think that thing, what would you even call that? Prejudice? Like how I prejudge who you are just because you look like you have a decent IG following?
I would.
I don't know that I can let that go. I can't not feel that. How can I not feel that way?
Well, I don't think you can not feel that way. I mean, here's what I think. I think you would I would encourage you to, though, like restrict the judgment to Instagram. You know, so for example, like if somebody were to not base somebody's talents off of it, you know? So for like, if somebody looks at my Instagram channel and they're like, I don't even know, I have like 1,000, maybe 100, right? On like my personal account.
Right.
But somebody looks at, I'm just going to say this gentleman's name, Todd Herman, who's not even a psychologist, but he's a coach. And he's got like 500,000.
I have no idea who he is, but I'm just laughing already.
So if somebody, let's say somebody's like, I need to work with somebody individually for like, to deal with my shit right now. Cause like I'm going off the rails. And they look at his Instagram and they're like, oh, well, he's got 500,000 followers. And they look at my Instagram and they're like, oh, Dr. Pence has 1,000 followers. I think I'm going to go with the 500,000. They're making a judgment on my expertise and talent based on my Instagram. Now, does Todd Herman have more influence on Instagram than I do? Damn right he does. Is he a better, like, I mean, he's not even a psychologist, but like, does he do better work with individuals than I do? I have no idea. I've never seen his work, but I would ask you to not assume that he does because more people follow him on Instagram. Like, but I think that's where we have to understand the limit of Instagram and where Instagram ends and begins.
Right. But again, I want to make sure people are clear. It's never about that number because the savvy person knows, right? So for example, there's somebody that Josh and I have made fun of plenty who like his number of likes go way up and down. And then if you see the comments, it's all the emojis, which it means it's just bots. And if
is that what that means?
Well, it means you've hired. It doesn't mean that the bots are commenting, but it means that they're real people. Those are actual accounts. But yes, if you see 100 responses and the first 50 are just a bunch of arms and fires and whatever, it's like you've hired a company that knows how to do that. So people have gotten, I'm blowing Dr. L's mind on Instagram, but it's why I always yell at you sometimes when you ask me questions and I'm like, this doesn't matter, that doesn't matter, like this is what you should focus on. So like that guy, and I think Joe's account's like that. We've talked about that. Mm-hmm. Joe DeSena immediately gets comments by all the other blue check marks who like want to be like Joe, but are probably just as sort of fake. Like maybe they've got as many, when I say fake, I know Joe's real, but I think his account's got some issues. We've talked about that.
Right.
But the point is that most people are savvy enough to know it's not just that number. They'll look at a couple posts, make sure you're real, make sure it's not just bots or just garbage memes or whatever. But again, it's this basis of you walk into a room and we do that thing. Is this person better looking than me? Does this person have more money than me?
We do.
Is this person cooler than me? Right? It's like we instantly, like it's like the greater than less than thing, right? Like we have that.
That's right.
I feel like built in, and I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten a little bit better at it. Like I used to like get physically anxious between ages, I think 18 and 25, because the question about where did you go to school came up. And before I was this, booming sense of entrepreneur life and confidence in it, I was very ashamed that I didn't go to school. And they would talk about what degrees they got. And I was like,
yeah.
That was my whole life for like 5 years. Like, please don't bring up where did you go to school? Right. And it's like, now I don't give a fuck, right? Like I legit don't care.
Right.
I will be impressed if you I'm impressed that like, make it OCR related, that
Rebecca Hammond goes to Harvard.
That Rebecca, and she's a fucking doctor, that she's put in the work, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of impressed.
So funny that you knew that I was going to say that, right? Like legit respect. But for the most part, I'm not going to shrink at a party because you got your fucking BA at Duke.
Right.
But I used to.
Right. Well, and I think we want to take shortcuts, right? Like psychology word calls them heuristics. Like we want to take the shortcuts in our brain. Like, oh, X person has their degree from here, i.e. smart. Oh, X person has this amount of followers on Instagram, must be famous, must be popular, must know what they're doing. Like we want to take the shortcuts in our brain. And I think again, to go sort of back to like the grander topic of where we were, it's like, this is where, our brain wants to take those really easy shortcuts. Like, well, not all cops are bad. So do all lives matter? It's like, that's the easy way out.
Right. But here, like, I was just thinking, like, as we were talking, like, I'm like, what am I going to call this episode? Right. And like, I actually thought like for a second, like, oh, all lives matter. It's like, no, you can't, because a lot of people view that as this anti-Black Lives Matter thing. Right.
Right.
Even though you and I know it's not.
Well, I know it's not, but now is not the time. Right. It's like, that meme that's going around right now where it's like one house is on fire and they're putting the hose out on the house that's not on fire. And it's like, this is what we're talking about when we say Black Lives Matter and you say all lives matter. You're trying to put water on a house that's not on fire. White people are not being oppressed. White people are not being killed in the streets.
I haven't heard that analogy yet. I like that.
Oh, so I think well, of course all lives fucking matter, but you're not on fire. So I'm not going to hose you down with water. Like, you don't have to put your hands on the steering wheel when you get pulled over. When you go in, when you wear a mask because of COVID, people aren't afraid of you also because you are Black and have a mask, so people can't see your face. And so now you're fucking freaked out because you think they're going to rob you. Like, these are the things where it's like, yes, I get it. This is true. There are cops that are wonderful, amazing human beings. Like, I know some. We have the man behind our house is, you know, like, there are incredible human beings that are police officers. And right now, I believe we need to take a deep, hard look at the ways that we are perpetuating prejudice against people of color and systematically killing them off and taking them off the streets.
Now you've upset me again.
Sorry. I love how when you're upset, you just sit back. It's like a really good, like, self-care moment for you. And listen, like, I feel strongly that this is an opportunity to dig deep. I mean, you know me, like, I can be an asshole sometimes. I can certainly.
Yeah, you're petty as fuck.
I can be. I mean.
But that's why I like you, because you're fucking real. You don't pretend to not be. You can be super. The reason I have you on this show is you have an insight I appreciate because of your profession, because of who you are as a person, and because you're real. Like, you're like, let's all be positive. Like, if you like people that are posting like okay, I just have to say this. So Bryant Gumbel has a show called Real Sports, right?
Oh, I love it.
Okay. Been watching it for years.
Yep. Obsessed.
Years. My wife and I watch this show. My wife often calls Bryant Gumbel the whitest Black man in America, just to make it a little bit about race there.
Because he has a notepad?
Who knows what's going on with the notepad, but just his general demeanor, right? Although I think he might have his title taken by Lester Holt. Did your child just try to come in the room?
Yeah. I went like this.
Right. That would not work for my kids. River would come over. Have you ever seen my show and River just comes over? Like, they both want to be part of the Zoom a lot lately. So they did one they said, let's talk to the announcers. Like, hey, we're missing sports. What about the guys that do the voices behind the sports? So they had Joe Buck and Jim Nantz.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And he said, how are you doing? Right. And Joe Buck, who I really like, says, this is going to go 2 hours, right? And he's like, I don't think so. He's like, we're going to tell my wife it went 2 hours so I can stay here in the basement. Right?
Away from my children.
Right? Because he's in fucking COVID.
Right.
And Jim Nantz is like, this is such a great time to smell up and smell the flowers. And it's like, you are 1,000% full of shit.
Right.
Like, and you've now gone down several notches to me as a person.
Right.
Right. Because you are full of shit. Like,
I get it.
It's like, hey man, this has been crazy and I've taken some time. But he was like all in on, just taking in how awesome it is right now to be home. It's like, fuck you, dude.
What's better than holding up the true value of family and togetherness?
Exactly. And Joe Buck is like, please don't let my wife know that we're fucking down here. I'm going bananas. So anyway.
Right. But I think, and this is like, I mean, this is also why I love having conversations with you. And I encourage people to have more of them. Like, I get it. It's not always, listen, like, the truth is, like, we are, a lot of us, 95% of us are truly afraid of what other people think, even at the smallest degree. Right. And especially in this conversation where, like, white people are stumbling over their words. They don't know what to say. They don't want to admit that, they are having racist thoughts or beliefs or feelings. And, just start talking, just start talking to the people in your circle and exploring what this means for you and why it matters. And listen, Black people, by the way, are also having difficult conversations. Like, they are not all in agreement of how to move forward here. They are not all in agreement of what comes next or what to do. Everybody is stumbling right now. But to just, I think, put your head in the sand and be like, this doesn't matter. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't impact me. I'm going to go on in my life. And, I think it's a missed opportunity for understanding yourself better. And exploring the parts of yourself that maybe you would rather prefer remain hidden?
Well, I got a message at Instagram that I shared with you.
Right.
I think after the first night.
Yep.
That was like, I want to know what all influencers in my life think about this, what's going on. And before I could answer, which I wasn't probably going to anyway, hour and a half, 2 hours later, this person wrote back, "Thanks, your silence is your answer."
That's right.
And it was like, I don't think I owe you anything. Like we've never even talked before. Like
Correct.
Literally there was no message history. And it was like, it insulted me. Like, what? I owe you some response, and within 2 hours, or you're going to unfollow me?
Right. Right. Which I think is completely unreasonable. And, everybody's entitled to operate through this in the way that they want to. And, I think more than anything, like right now, everybody should be really more concerned with their own thoughts and feelings about this and diving deep than necessarily like who they're following. And as I said earlier, it's also okay to be disappointed by the people who you might follow, who are important to you, whose opinion matters to you, and they say nothing. It's so, there's a big degree of like, oh, I'm going to not follow this person anymore, to like, man, I wish they would say something. I just wish.
Who do you wish would say something that didn't?
Well, I don't think there's like a particular person. Like, as we talked about last night, like, or as we went back and forth on text, and Josh was sort of acknowledging like some of the OCR influencers who were posting or whatnot. I was like, yes, they're leaning in, and the majority of them, and I'm going to say this, were women, because I think women are a little bit more apt to raise their hand and be uncomfortable than men are. But I don't think it was like one specific person. I think it was just, listen, like the OCR is a small community. I get that. We're not the NBA. We're not the NFL. I totally understand that. And the majority of individuals, at least what I have seen when I have attended these races, who have shown up to these races, are not people of color. The majority of them, from my perspective, are white. And
it's like, I would say it's in the 90%.
Yeah.
Our sport.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so. But, and I think, no matter if you have influence, like people are looking to you, people are curious about what you have to say. And so why not throw something out there?
Well, getting back to this and my personal, I know this is going to sound like silly, or may sound silly, but I forget that. Like, I forget that I have some voice.
Right. And you do.
Right. And even, more locally, when I started doing my Atlanta podcast and talking to people and having these hard conversations, a week or two later, like I'm doing what I normally do and I'm trolling and making inappropriate jokes and whatever. And a guy who I respect said, you got to be careful, dude. Like you have a voice. And I was like, whatever. Like, this is the Atlanta podcast where I'm nowhere near the following I have in ORM, like not even close. Right. Mm-hmm. And I just started it. And he said, Matt, you have a platform other people don't have. And if you're going to talk to, X, Y, and Z people that wouldn't mean anything to people listening to this, but some people in Atlanta, then it matters. So, even in this, like as we're talking, I'm having so many doubts. Like, I shouldn't even put this out. We're two white people. What do we have to say?
Right. Totally.
We shouldn't do this. I can't even think of what to call it. And I am going to put it out. But I really don't know what to call it. So do you want to help me come up with a title? Because at the end, it doesn't really matter. I mean, people are going to listen or they're not, but
I don't know what you should call it. I do. And here's, I guess, I had an aha moment where I'm less disappointed in an individual who doesn't post and more disappointed that we live that our current culture in society leaves people of influence afraid to post because they might lose sponsors, because they might lose business. Like, that we are in a place where if you say Black Lives Matter. What, I mean, like, think about that. Like, yeah, of course they do. And if you say that, you could be at risk of losing a sponsor, or people not liking you, or you being seen as disruptive, or, you being associated with looters. Like, I'm more disappointed that we live in that culture where, and maybe that's what it is.
What percentage is that? And what percentage do you think is, I just don't know what to say, which is where I've been sitting for the last 2 days?
I gotta say, I think it's pretty, I think the fear of, for like people who really like the way they make their money, and the way that I forget the word for it. There's a word for it, but like
we should play a game. We should.
Can you find the word?
Hang on.
I think a lot of people are really scared. I mean, this is a perfect example, Matt. Today,
I want to go ahead. I want to play a game of like who you think's posted new. Like, I'm thinking off the top of my head, like, okay, Tom Brady. What do you think Tom Brady has said? Like,
nothing.
I bet he said something super safe. So let's just go check him out.
I bet he said nothing.
I bet he said something really, really safe, but we'll see. Okay, Tom Brady, top of the world of influence. Okay, he did the black thing. So today,
right. So this is the blackout, and this is a perfect example.
So that's the easiest thing you can do today, don't you think?
Well, I think this is a perfect example of like, listen, you don't have to say anything.
His last post before that was 6 days ago.
Okay.
Which was him doing the golf thing. So between now and Blackout Tuesday, he said nothing. And you think between now and then he should have said something?
No, I don't think he's obligated to say anything.
All right, let's give me a name.
And I don't really care about Tom Brady.
I know, but I'm just trying to think of influencers, like people who make a difference to people. Just name somebody.
Joe Rogan.
Oh, that's probably a good one. Joe Rogan.
I bet he said something.
2 days ago, he's got "This Made Me Tear Up," and it's the sheriff who leaned. Okay, so Joe's not afraid. Joe's definitely not afraid. Joe's posting a lot. He's got some LA stuff. Joe's leaning in.
See, but maybe he's sort of in, or not to categorize people, but maybe he's in the safer category, because like he's so successful that it, like, at this point it almost doesn't.
No, I think some of those people like fucking butter wouldn't melt in their mouth. I don't know what that's from, but no, I think some people, no matter what, like they're never gonna. But I just think that's a pretty good example, though. Tom Brady said nothing. Now he's doing and again, Tom, you're a great guy. We love you. But I'm just saying it's not a surprise to me that Rogan leaned in and posted, "This is some horrible shit. This made me cry." And Tom Brady's like, just going to kind of, because Tom Brady is that successful. Tom Brady is certainly more globally recognized than Joe Rogan. Like, Joe Rogan is very influential and is listened to all over the world. But if you dropped him off a plane in Kenya, no one would know who Joe Rogan was, and they probably would know who Tom Brady was. I mean, but that's what I'm saying. Like, that's worldwide. Do you understand?
I understand what you're saying.
Like, that's where it transcends, right? People like Muhammad Ali, Kobe, Michael Jackson, Tom Brady, any country, anywhere in the world, drop them off, they're surrounded.
Yeah.
That's a different level of
might be
fame.
a stretch, but
What's that?
I understand. I was saying Tom Brady might be a stretch, because I don't know that if I saw Tom Brady in a bar, I'd know who he was, but.
Okay. What about Tiger? Just out of curiosity, what do you think old Tiger's saying?
Tiger said something.
Tiger's got a whole other thing going on too, right? Tiger was May 24th was the golf thing, and then 13 hours ago, my heart goes out to George Floyd, his loved ones, and all who are hurting right now. I've always had the utmost respect for law enforcement. This is shocking. Okay, you can read his post. And
again, I mean, I think, like, here's what I want to stress. Like, you're not a bad person if you don't say anything. And I don't think less of you if you don't say anything. And listen.
But you were surprised by silence, you were saying.
I was surprised by silence. And I was a little, because it felt like, when there's like, when you hug somebody for just a touch too long and you're like, that became a little awkward. It's like some people, it's like when there's Like, it's almost like there's, you went one day too far. Now, listen, I am aware that right now I'm being perhaps unreasonable. That's how I feel. And this is the thing, like, I can hold those two opposites. I believe that nobody is obligated to say anything. And I can be disappointed when they do. Does it mean I'm going to unfollow them? Nope. I haven't unfollowed a single person because of this. Does it mean that I don't think they're incredible athletes and or even incredible humans? No, it doesn't. And I think, because of my own beliefs, and this is just me wanting to project my beliefs onto other people and hope that everybody would also want, there to be changes and shifts in the way that we think and treat Black people. I would want everybody to be in a position where they say, yes, all Black lives matter. This is true. Period. End of statement. Not, and all lives matter. Just Black lives matter.